You're live.
Welcome to Community Cuts. We are live from Brooklyn, New York, and I have my colleagues here. We're going to be talking about the Trump effect. Before we go there, 732 Washington Avenue, Salon Leahing. I've been always advocating that we should support our Black businesses. So I'm asking people to support Salon Leahing. 732 Washington Avenue. We have beauticians, professional beauticians, barbers, and they are excellent. I want to keep the dollar flowing through our Black businesses around Brooklyn, in Brooklyn, around as well. And so I'm asking people to come out and support us and support your Black businesses that's in your current neighborhood. Well, we're going to be talking about the Trump effect. So I'm going to ask my Sharon to elaborate on this.
So the Trump effect is vast. Even the Trump election is vast. If you talk about who voted for Trump, right, and the recent inauguration, that was not an outdoor affair, but an indoor affair, and you have this conversation that's shorthand. The 92% of us were not here. We're not allies because we warned you and you did not listen to us. Let's look at what the effects could be. Right. So when you start out, everyone was discussing Project 2025 last year. And what was that? It was essentially a manifesto. What's going to happen the next time we have a Republican president? Right. And it's a 180-day plan, 6 months. They know they have to implement the changes quickly before people actually realize what's going on. So, some people will say, look at all of those tech billionaires sitting in front of cabinet members on the dais as Trump was sworn in, right? So, are you saying that private citizens are going to have more of a role in the country's governance? And one of those tech billionaires, excuse me, soon to be trillionaire, Elon Musk, was actually tasked with something called Doge. And it is a Department of Governmental Oversight of Expenditures. What it's supposed to do with, along with Vivek Ramathi, how do you say his last name? Do you remember? But I'll just say Vivek, right?
Ramaswamy.
Can you repeat that for me?
Ramaswamy.
Ramaswamy, who's also a millionaire, right? And their job originally was to find government inefficiencies. So they're trying to make the government efficient. Well, what is inefficiency in government and why are you focusing on that? Because that's one thing. But the thing that everybody needs to be aware of is what the effects will be in terms of taxes and tariffs and how that affects us, right? And we're not even going to talk about policy implications of not right now, of what the different cabinet positions are going to look like. For example, if we have another pandemic, those of us who go food shopping know that the avian flu has struck. And how do we know that? Because when I went into the supermarket, the cheap eggs were $7.50 a dozen, right? And we all have known eggs as a cheap source of protein, right? $7.50 exceeds the last time we had a high price range, and it's double the amount I paid for eggs prior to Thanksgiving. So if this is going to talk, if this is what we're going to see, a rapid escalation in food prices, and the promise that was made to many in America was that I'll do something to bring the prices of groceries down. We clearly are not seeing that. So where's the affordability? And then if you want to tie that into something that is relevant to people who have less income rather than more income, and you talk about the SNAP program, which once upon a time was known as food stamps or food coupons that were issued by the Department of Agriculture to make sure that people had access to food and there was a market for the farmers. Well, if you talk about that eligibility, a lot more people need a lot more help and they're able-bodied and working and they're still finding it hard to make ends meet. So that's the practical part. But Christian, I know you have a lot of thoughts about this.
I'm going to settle with some unique details. Project 2025 discussed education, discussed medical, it discussed not only taxes, but estates. It talked about literally immigration, heavily on immigration, heavily on those who are not seen as us. And us is a very unique word for what us to them is. And us is not anybody technically white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. But here's the kicker. Not anyone rich white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. So the Trump effect is so beautiful because you have so many who are stepping behind his banner, especially the poor white that are stepping behind this banner and not recognizing that they'll be affected the most with a lot of the decisions. In fact, most Republican decisions were the ones taking most of their jobs away and sending them overseas. So, in fact, diversity was so to help most white women more than any other kind of group, period. And so now that we're taking away diversity initiatives, white women are going to be the most affected over this process, period. To see the rollback on immigration, to see the rollback on LGBT rights, to see the rollback, but see, it's the joke about it is these are the windows to undo everyone's rights. See, we couldn't, because of how much we had to dance around the Black movement, the African American getting rights in America. There has been such a battle of trying to, how do we undo all of those rights that we've given those people? Because now other people can step on those shoulders and get their rights, and they don't feel the same burden that we had to build up to get to these kinds of rights. So now that we have doors and windows such as the LGBT, well, we don't need to marry you because I don't like what you represent. Okay, you don't like that I'm wearing a hat. You don't like how my pants are sagging. You don't like this t-shirt. You don't like the color of me in your office. So, but we're not discussing how simple it is to turn what you don't like into everybody's problem. Let's come a little further. My youth have been so affected by, you're sitting there talking about pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Rent is 4 or 5 times higher just to get an apartment than it was 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. You have all of my youth have to get into a trouble marriage, which y'all are like, that's unheard of. How can 3 people marry? And we need 3 incomes just to eat. So it's not unheard of for us to have to hurdle together to get the resources that we need for survival. It's not magic that they want to be vegan, because all of the food you're giving them has now changed them genetically, has changed their mindset, has made them lethargic, passive, can't think, can't do. What is it that the writing on the wall haven't proven? We're now sitting with medical that has gone rampant. Medical has no oversight to the point that $30,000 is still that number. It's still that magical.
For what? $30,000.
COVID. If I write COVID on your name underneath anywhere on that documentation, magically it will be all over the documentation from the day you leave the hospital. When you come back to the hospital, it's still on. You can't get around COVID. And the joy about COVID is once it's on there, you can't scrub that sucker off, and they can just wait for you to die. I don't have to help you because you have COVID. I don't have to do an autopsy. You have COVID. Nothing about what I do They died. But doctor, they died because you didn't help them. They have COVID.
So
these are the magical effects behind what we're coming into. Now we have Republicans who already don't care about how people survive already. And we're talking about we need them to do oversight. Republicans are the ones that least want to do oversight. We're talking about want to do oversight for businesses, jobs, people, ethnicity. Republicans don't want any kind of oversight. So the joke of all of this is we have the same ones who don't want to do anything in power. Congratulations. Welcome to the new America.
So when you talk about what Project 2025 is, it's a manifesto from the Heritage Foundation. Is conservatively skewed. And as you were saying, it's like oversight, who wants oversight? Because typically you'll hear people that you're infringing with our ability to make money. When you talk about policy, one of the things that they have been trying to get rid of is the Affordable Care Act, right? The very same people, working people who find it very expensive to access healthcare, right? One of the largest sources of bankruptcies is because of medical bills, right? People get treated and they look at the bills and they say, OMG, I don't have the insurance. Or when you go to a medical practice, right, and they don't accept your insurance, how are you going to find an alternative? So you're looking at healthcare, you're looking at rights, because when you look at the previous election, what they did is they looked at the social issues as what they said were the driving forces. And people were so galvanized around, I don't want a transgender child to play on the girls' soccer league, even though she is a transgendered person, right? So you're looking at that and you're not looking at the economic harm. And part of that is the disconnect you have with the Democratic Party and working class people, because the Democrats have been painted now as being elitist, which, if you look at society's growth over the last 50 years, Republicans tend to be the elitists, right? They are the traditionalists. They're the ones that are most able, especially the men, are most able to access those high-profile jobs. They're the ones that are most able to access college. And what happens with college is granddad went to Yale, dad went to Yale, daughter went to Yale, and now baby boy, because he's a legacy admission, right? So you can't scrub that away about how things interact. But you look again at our working class and our poor class, part of it is the creation or to permanently enshrine a caste system, right? And, you look at the fact that you've had efforts to propel more people who are quote unquote from disadvantaged backgrounds or non-traditional backgrounds to attend these schools. And people, as you said, who were able to leverage the efforts of persons of African descent around civil rights. And they say, you've taken our spots in school. What do you mean your spot, right? And when you look at the admissions to the elite schools, 40% of those schools have legacy admissions. Now, let's be clear. There are a lot of people that struggled, and when I say struggle, to maintain an academic education in what was a somewhat hostile environment for many, right? But now that they are graduated from those very same elite schools, they want their children to have those privileges. And the big ha-ha is like they're going after people of African descent, but they really don't want anybody to raise out of their place. Remember, was it the Republican convention where the current president said the black jobs? And everybody was like, what is the black jobs? But you have a history in America, you know what they were. They were the jobs that were excluded from Social Security as a compromise by Roosevelt in the 1930s to try and combat what the Great Depression was, right? So again, where is that economic stability? And what's happened with, especially when you look at the Midwest, you don't even have to go that far. Go to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where you had all of the steel that was being built, poured, manufactured in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And they heat up the metal and it's really hot and it pours and they mold it and this, that, and the other. You go there now, you see what was mighty industry, right? And what do they have as their economic driver? A casino. A casino does not provide the same kind of income you have from a labor job. And then you look at trying to decimate union unions, right? And look
Mhm.
at those laborers, right? Because you have a fight back. If you go into an employment attorney's office because you're having a hard time, one of the first things they'll ask you is, do you belong to a union, right? And union organization and being able to maintain a living wage. And as you said, living wage is not what it once was, right? People want to go back to the quote unquote good times, right? And they refer to the times where mom was able to stay at home, right? Dad worked and they were able to buy a house, maybe a new car every other year, right? Have some children, go to good public schools. That's all hell in a handbasket, right? And then now you look at women participating in the workforce. Well, who's watching the children? And as women continue to participate in the workforce, you see the sizes of families going down.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of this because you look at some of the laws that are coming up, right? Is this to make sure that women return to the home in a subservient place, in their place? Maybe not the black job, but the woman job.
Mhm.
And the woman job, right, is to be the caretaker in the home, which makes a woman dependent upon their spouse for their livelihood, right? And you just look at places like Texas where it's a leader in many things, right? It's a leader in it does it, and now you do not have no fault divorce. They are leaders in um, making sure women no longer have bodily control over their reproductive
Yep.
rights, right? They're leaders in their anti-immigrant or migrant, immigrant and migrant. You have to have a conversation about what the difference is between the two, right? Who they think of the others. The mayor of Chicago recently talked about ICE coming to Chicago because ICE is, again, the enforcement. What is migrant? This is one of the outcomes of Project 2025. This active push against immigration, right? So there are a couple of things to unpack here, right? One is ICE is on steroids. When you looked at TikTok today, people would, it's like, listen, the ice cream man is in Bushwick, Williamsburg, and they were like, ice cream in the winter. And it's like, what are you, oh,
Mhm.
they're talking about they're making sweeps in communities that are known to have large numbers of immigrants, right? Then you talk about the migrants, or you talk about the people who come to the United States because their countries are under great stress. And as the mayor in Chicago said, I don't hear anybody complaining about Ukrainians, right? But you have problems with the southern border. What is the difference between the Ukrainians and those coming from the southern borders, right? And that's a whole conversation. And we're all perfectly aware of all of that and what that means, right? But who provides labor, right? Who, in the 2016 election cycle, Trump was like lazy Mexicans. I've never seen an immigrant who's lazy. I've never met one. I would love to meet one. But they showed pictures of like our construction workers, especially. They went to Las Vegas and they showed men that were visibly Hispanic. We don't know what their ethnicity was. Roofing in Las Vegas in the summer. Talk about hotter than July. But it's like bring back our jobs, bring back our good paying jobs. Well, your good paying jobs dissipated over a period of time, right? So we're talking about tariffs to bring jobs back to the United States, right? But really, this really started with NAFTA. And tariffs means that we're going to have to pay the goods of goods and services, not the countries that are importing goods. So you're not curtailing the production in China or India and Vietnam. You're just making it more expensive to us, all right? And people fundamentally didn't understand that. They don't understand what free trade is. The free trade agreement was to balance out the taxation and the cost of getting goods and services, right? But that disemboweled the industrial Midwest, right? And then here's another thing too. If you look at education rates, right? Black women have attained a high level of education. They're the most educated people in the United States, right? Percentage wise. So here's the thing. People that were able to get jobs as high school dropouts, those jobs exist, but they don't pay well. In order for you to participate in the workforce, you have to have an education, right? Or participate in a workforce in a job that's going to allow you to earn a living, right? If it's special training, IT, right? Programmers and such, you can accomplish that. But you look at the educational system and again, the disembowelment, because now public education, I think, is the hallmark of being an American, a quality public education, because you're educated without regards to your circumstance. And that's not the case now, right? So that changes, and it also is dumbing down what people actually need to learn. So, how are you going to be affected in this generation? You're not making ends meet. And as you alluded to, it's very hard to find affordable housing, at least in these here parts. And they say you're not supposed to spend more than 33% of your income on housing.
Hello, somebody.
It's been 50% for a long time, and it's now approaching 2/3. So if all of your money is going into housing, how are you buying food? How are you saving for retirement? Because we've moved away from those pensions that you received as a union worker to 401ks and 503bs. Can you actually save enough for retirement? Or are we going to have to work forever? And then you look at policy, once again, they're discussing about raising the retirement age. Now, here's the thing, right? Who guarantees that someone's going to live to 67? Because we all know people that have paid into Social Security and have died.
We have.
May I say something?
Sure.
Yes, I say
Multiple
something. I
notes.
think
Yes.
that here's my stuff that I'm thinking about. In a way, I think the Black community hopefully wakes up. We are inventors. We are creators. And one of the things that hit me in the spirit is that one can't be a victim and a creator at the same time. So we have to make a choice. And in that choice, of course, we're going to take the side of being a creator, right? God has created us, and he said that he has created us in his image. So we are creators. And I think once we start, moving in that direction, creating our own businesses, our own jobs, and pushing aside things that, because you can go to all the best schools that there are, you can go to Ivy League schools, but it may not help you. Right. And so my thing now, okay, guys, we see we see the writing on the wall. What are you going to do? What are you going to start creating for yourself? And as you create, spend with your own community, make that dollar go around at least 10 times or even more for everybody to be a part of that creativity. So we are now starting to create our own businesses, our own pools of trust, because waiting for a handout, it's not going to happen.
But those things existed in our community before. If you look at things like when you were unable to borrow money for a mortgage, that's when the ministers in New York City got together and created Carver Federal Bank, right? Vanguard also had a credit union, right? Vanguard also associated with political power, right? Because you can have your own business, but part of moving it forward, having an idea, is having capital. And it's the access to capital that it hinders us. Even if you have a successful business, you have to scale it to be able to really enjoy the fruits of your labor. And that's when it becomes really difficult. On the other hand, with technology, you're able to create all kinds of businesses, right? For example, on YouTube, you have the influencers, right? That's a whole class of people. That is a whole field that did not exist before, because the influencers have become your cyber people to give you advice. Hey, if you want to build an inexpensive closet, if you need to repair a toilet, hey, here's what I think about luxury brands. And they're making money in a different way, because one of the things that was very prevalent in the 60s was advertising. And this is the new form of advertisement.
Unfortunately, what hurts historically, you talk about invention. we have created everything from blenders to the lights to almost practically every invention that America has marketed and made billions off of. But see, here's the problem with that. We created it. They came in, took it as soon as it was made by us, and then marketed it themselves. But they convinced us that we didn't do that.
Even whiskey.
They convinced us that we did no longer had the capacity to create what they were constantly stealing. So now the children don't remember that we were the ones to get America out of the ruts that is currently in. So what we have harbored is a cycle mentality that we can only be crafted in the arts when we were needed to put people on the moon. The woman who was now, 95? She was the only one to practically still up until she died. Hidden numbers. It's not hidden figures. How much we have to do to keep America afloat, that it's almost shocking, scary, and at the same time,
so we're saying we don't have the ability to own our intellectual property and market it.
When we would do it, it would be taken and used. And so therefore, even in the fact of today, we're talking about the attack on TikTok. We're talking about the attack on social media. We're talking about the attack on Airbnb. A lot of the things that, yes, it helped a lot of white advertisers, but it helped a lot of Black advertisers as well, because it took the face out of just the advertisement. Now you're making money on your home that you couldn't talk to a lot of white candidates, but a lot of white candidates love the Black houses because they clean, but you wouldn't know. If we take our pictures down, you don't know whose owns that house. We making some serious money.
So you're talking about how when someone has their house appraised, how the appraisal rates are lower oftentimes, or lower oftentimes if they know it's a Black community, right?
If they know it's a Black home, for any reason, you bring your white friend over and you say, just be here when the appraiser's here and have them appraise my house while you're here. Walk with them. And the value of their house is sometimes up to double the amount of your home. These kinds of, it's the access to capital has been redlined for a very long time. And these same mechanisms is affecting youth in general. But see, the children now didn't realize, how do they know how to take away from us so easily? They've been practicing it for decades with the Black community. The difference with the Latin community is being able to huddle and pool their money together because they're not told you can't be together. They haven't got it into their psychological, deep-rooted meaning that we can't stay, we can't have houses, we can't be married, we can't have the wife together. They are physically given the same scenario as we have, but without the psychological implications that we can no longer be.
Or the cultural
I do get that. I do get that. But one of the things I want to say, I don't want to,
go.
is that we are America. We are America. And if we stop thinking about we came here in 1619, which is not true, we are America. So however we want to walk this beat out, we're walking it out in our own energy and our own power, because we're not walking it out in under somebody else's umbrella. And when we do that, then we give them the energy. And now there's a new day, there's a new sheriff in town. And that's the kids that's coming out now. They're the new sheriff. And we got to, as the elders, to guide them and navigate them, because they're the ones that's going to be putting things together. But we're the ones that say, look, I'm America. You're America. So who do you think else is America? You're going to tell me that I just got off the slave ship in 1619 when we know that's not true. All right. So I look at it in the sense that, okay, guys, we have to put our face on this building, the stamp, because we're it, and not look back. Because if you look back in the rear view mirror, It's going to be things that we're going to try to stick to us. But go ahead.
The
Sorry.
youth have no problem with not looking back. The problem is every time you try to move forward, back shadows come from all the way from wherever they do and pull you back. We're still talking about technology. We're in 2025. We still talking about human rights. Like, it's not, we supposed to be talking about how do we get to some planet. We talk about Star Wars, Twilight, I don't care. But really, I mean, it's not, when you're young, you're not thinking about half of the nonsense of what separates us. You know who your friends are, you know who your friends are not. You worried about how we going to get from point A to point B, how fast can we play, how fast can we move. But now,
and inherently, what's fair?
And it's the playground. But okay, we get that the rules of the playground is also some level of bullying that we have to correct too. However,
ooh, I want to say something to you. I just got this in my spirit. And so we worried about the rules of the playground, but think about this. I want to connect to the rules of the universe, right? Because the universe holds everything. And if I connect to this small little segment of America, a small little segment of the world, then there's a universal law. And you can't jump over it. It's law. And so connect to the universal law allows us to now think differently, not small, but beyond. And so as we groom our children, groom the kids that's coming up to the universe and allow them to put their energies out there to now create, because we are creators, right?
We are creators, but you create under certain conditions. And we have created many things under a very tight microscope.
Correct.
And the children no longer want to operate under that same mindset, but at the same time, they have been convinced that they're not creators. And creating doesn't mean arts. And that is something that we have to impart more than ever. We had to create in science and technology to get people to the moon. We had to be in a lot of these jobs, from everything from architecture to, we have to be in the room to say, you're thinking about it with this logic of what can we do? I'm thinking about it in the logic of what is possible, what is feasible, and possibly what haven't we done yet. And because we think differently, when no matter if it's math, science, technology, arts, we think differently.
But that's why we need to be in the room, because when you have a diversity of opinions, right, that's where you're actually going to solve the problem. You'll see a weakness in something that's not apparent to someone else, right? There's a YouTube creator, Jody Ann, and she is an accountant, works in financial institutions. And she just recently spoke about when she was trying to advance her career at a particularly large financial institution, how she was told by her manager that she had to do other stuff. And she was voluntold to be on the recruiting team for Fordham University, right? Even though you had Fordham University graduates at the team, they didn't have a wide enough perspective to understand that's primarily a commuting school. Well, who are you looking at? Well, we're looking at sororities. Which sororities? They didn't include the Divine Nine. They didn't include like the National Association of Black Accountants, right? So, two of the financial institutions are pushing back hard about the elimination of DEI. Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, they tend to be market leaders, right? So clearly having a diverse workforce is attractive to them. Not the window dressing, but knowing you have people in the room. It's like having a mechanic, an accountant, an engineer, and I'll say an executive assistant, because they know how to organize things and who they need to talk to get things done, how to get stuff, right? In a room to be able to move a project effectively forward, I recently had an interaction with a bank that I had been a contractor for about 20 years ago. And I saw the front end developing of technology. And here I am, a customer, seeing its manifestation. I know what those teams look like. And we got coding from overseas. A lot of it was trash, but it was the basis of what we were doing. Right. So it's like you look at that and how do you, language, how things affect people or not affect people is very important to be able to conduct not only business, but the business of the United States government. And we're talking government at the federal level, we're talking government at the state level, we're talking government at the local level for us, New York City, right? Who is having that conversation about what the needs are? Who is making the decisions about where the tax dollars are, right? So often, where the tax dollars go and those decision makings about newfangled policy, they rarely talk to the people who are most affected by it, right? And it's a very good thing to be able to say that not only do I think this is going to bolster our overall goals, but this is going to meet our target audience. And our target audience should be the people that are voting for you. But so many people think they can bamboozle the voters, bamboozle the citizens, and carry on their own agendas. And who loses out? People that can't find for affordable housing, people that are having difficulty navigating the street, people that are losing out on the good transportation that we have in central Brooklyn. You have such good transportation in central Brooklyn. Don't you want to share? Well, who are you building this infrastructure out for? Is it for the benefit of mommy or Susie who are taking the bus or the train? Or is it for the anticipated arrival of people that are coming into these new buildings that are being built that everybody feels are unaffordable? And you look at it just in terms of like housing stock in New York City. What you're hearing are the youth are asking for studio apartments and one-bedroom apartments because maybe, perhaps, they'll have the opportunity to live by themselves and not have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 roommates, right? To be able to afford the rent. But here's the thing: when you build a multiplicity of studios and one bedrooms, right? We have very stable communities because you're able to grow into them. So if you don't have family sized apartments, as soon as you have 1 or 2 children, you're going to have to be looking for bigger digs.
That's if you can afford it. And honestly speaking, youth have recognized that it is too expensive to have children. That is why we have a reduction of birth rate that has been continuously reducing, for the simple fact of, if you can't afford to, how are you bringing in somebody else? I mean, we huddle together. Am I going to put my child through the fact that I can barely get it together? Like, it is right now we are dealing with those who are very in tuned with their reality. Before, we had those who knew you did not, and you some that did, that they had quite a bit. But now, so many youth, black, white, indifferent, have the same situation across the board, that if we're not as being heard, if you're going to consider Democrat now, you have to begin to recognize the unity, if not even in that fact,
or the disunity.
But if we're gonna say that we have these kinds of things that are actually happening to people, we can no longer keep being afraid to talk about dark blue things. Human rights has now become so far to the left that it's almost like, well, why are you a Democrat if you can't handle human rights anymore? Like, we've made so much. Our enemy to our country has been a party who has now said business over people, who has now specifically said that we don't have to worry about the majority, as long as, if they're pulled together in very simple places, such as very small businesses, if you have the most amount of wealth. And this isn't new. This, in the beginning, when the country was first there were a lot of wealthy people too. But that's why we made it specific that it was one man, one vote. It took them 200 years to figure out a way to say, how do we convince people that their vote doesn't matter? Because if enough of them know that their vote doesn't matter, then it doesn't matter that I have 1 million. If none of them show, then my one vote means more than all of their votes. So we've turned dollars into votes, and people have basically given up the even thinking or understanding. And what's gotten even more scary is Republicans have now made it in such a way where you believe your skewed vote is doing something in some warped way. And so it's become so warped that now you're voting against your own self-interest. That is the 2025 policy plan. It is not new because they've been talking about this thing for the past 60 years. The only difference that they actually said themselves, this is that on live TV, Fox News, yes. The guys said, we did not have a face that could promote our philosophy. As long as we don't have a face to promote our philosophy, we're dead in the water. Then somebody like Trump comes along, which technically, if we want to be honest and speaking, his whole family is Democratic. Most of them is immigrants, but that's a whole story in itself. So with that being said is—
The immediate family?
Immediate family, yes. Come on now, most of his wives, but—
Wives plural.
Wives, plural. We're gonna just ease our way on to where we're going after all of these. Specifically, when we say immigrant, we're not talking about Europeans. We weren't even, when the Africans came here, we had a lot of African immigrants who was in New York City. And we were like, okay, are they going to get the same kind of benefits, rights, rules? Right? They almost looked at as though, no, you were black first, immigrant second. And we were like, wait a minute, like, I mean, don't they have the same amount of needs that an immigrant would need? Like, we're going to just throw them onto your community, you're going to figure it out. But don't they need translators and they need So with that being said is the outright attack with using immigration as the outright attack on the Latin community, strong. My Latin brothers and sisters, when those words is dog whistles, black folks, we know that we have dog whistles for us. You know your dog whistles too. So when they're coming after you, when we say banding together, it is almost a necessity. Right now, he has made open season on you. ICE, no matter where, what city you are in, country, state, opportunity, they are coming hard. And they're going to use this time frame within the next 6 months as an excuse, because the presidency, although he's coming in, you technically have this probationary grace period, 3 months of last year into 6 months of this year. So they can use that as a complete excuse to go carte blanche on whatever, because it won't catch up for another until June. Oops, we did this person. Could be a cousin who has their papers already out the country. And that's how wild we are with at least the immigration part of this 2025 policy situation.
And politically, you have to really think about it. So, the election was in 2024. We're now in 2025. We have Republicans controlling all 3 branches of government, right? So the expectation will be that it will be a tough race in 2026, that somewhere along the line, the incumbent party usually loses one or both of the legislative houses, right? So they're trying to impose the policies, implement the policies while they can, because oftentimes it's hard to undo them. And executive orders, which is what Obama had to use because the
Republicans,
the Senate Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, proudly proclaimed he will be a one-term president, right? Mm-hmm. So they were obstructionists. You talk about the most recent Congress, and 2 moderate Republicans prevented the Democrats from putting forth their original plan, right, mm-hmm. for economic development. But we don't talk about mention, right, from West Virginia, and we don't talk about, gosh, it's a woman, I can't remember her name at the moment, right? But the 2 of them, we're moderates, right? We oppose these, and truthfully, they had a tough electoral role because they were Democrats in what have been Republican states. But because it wasn't a unified effort, they weren't able to put forth many of the economic plans. And also the things that are benefiting us, like infrastructure. I remember when Joe Biden said that coming into New York City was coming into a third world country when you flew into LaGuardia. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't untruthful just in terms of, you know, what is it? Why does it look this way? Why does it function this way? And we put a lot of government dollars behind improving LaGuardia Airport, right? We put a lot of government dollars into providing transportation, like air to the train. We put a lot of government dollars into making sure that, you know, we had some sort of access. That's one thing. But then you look at the contracts, and going back to what Duke was saying, you know, Black businesses, how much of it do we access, right? What they call as an assault on DEI, right? They, you know, pejoratively are using DEI as didn't earn it. And they'll refer to people as presidential candidate Kamala Harris, right? I'm sorry, but she's the vice president of the United States. Before that, she was the attorney general of the largest state. Before that, California, let's shout out California. And before that, she was a district attorney the district attorney in San Francisco, right? And then we talk about the presidential response to the disaster that is California. California is the fourth or fifth largest economic entity, all right? And you're saying that you're not going to give them assistance based upon politics?
Wait
right?
a minute.
But
Reagan,
you know, and then
Reagan
when you think,
did the same thing.
And wait. But when you think about it, the House Majority Leader is from Louisiana. Hello, Katrina. Did we ask those questions, right? But to try and tie it to object and say, we need to bring down the water from California to Los Angeles. The water was there. That wasn't the problem, right? We need to make sure they have voter ID because we want to make sure the right people are voting, right? And it goes back to the dog whistle because along the southern tier, specifically California and Texas, have large Hispanic populations. So is this what they're afraid of? And they look at Florida. Well, Florida has the Cubans, right? And it's just like you look in New York, it's the Dominicans. So really, what are we saying here? Who's supposed to have a voice or not have to have a voice? And then surprisingly, in large Hispanic communities in New York City, they went for Trump, right? And it's, you know, you talk about migration, you know, what the traditional pattern has been of migration. A man comes first, he brings his wife later, or he goes home to get a wife, right? They come, they raise their families, they bring their brothers and sisters over as they have an opportunity. That's the very same kind of chain migration, right? That, you know, the immigration policies have been working against. And not so unsurprisingly, the First Lady of the United States, right, is an immigrant, right? And her parents came through the ability because she was already here. Isn't that chain migration, right? And then you talk about migration in the earliest of the 20th century, there weren't immigration laws. So when you hear that I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, somebody's worked hard, saved the money, and got on that boat with $10 and came here without as much interference as we have. And what did they do? They built small businesses, they worked hard, right? And then maybe a son, two sons, a daughter goes to college, right? And that's how they progress. And now you're seeing people objecting to children who were born in the United States being able to have their birthright citizenship, or children who have only known the United States as their home. They came with their parents. Children don't have a choice. If mom says, come here, you're going to follow because you can't object. So you want these children that are American that could be productive, you want to hinder their productiveness. And people will say, well, their papers weren't right? Then what's wrong with our immigration system? Let's focus on fixing that rather than blaming people for what's going on.
Right now, I think solutions is in order.
I agree.
Republicans, every time a Democrat puts a policy up front, Republicans don't aim to attack the policy outright. They specifically design a part of the policy that's easy to attack. And then once you pull that thread out, you can then deravel the rest of a policy. One of the things that we haven't, unfortunately, we're not so diabolical to try to destroy the other side, but because we do not choose to take a page out of the book does not make our enemy any less dangerous. And even though you want to be Superman so much, Lex Luthor being as smart, it takes almost luck or God-given to prevent Superman from falling into the greatest traps. Because if it weren't written for Superman to survive, Lex Luthor would have had Superman a lot of times over. I can't, like, it's not rocket science.
Is this the Marvel universe coming
This is
forth?
we're DC, wait a minute.
DC Comics and Marvel? Okay,
DC.
okay.
Wait, hold on now, wait a minute. But in that, understand our superheroes are written in to win. But I learned from a very interesting game. I'm going to throw some computer terminology for my World of Warcraft and Warcraft players. The moonlight falls upon the guilty and the innocent alike.
Mm-hmm.
Because of this fact, our enemy worships the same God. And if you believe so hard, it doesn't take our enemies to bombard you all the time. It just takes one or two good times to derail everything you have. And now that we have to be aware of this, there are certain things, certain pages we have to take out of their book. If it is so that we have to cram down their vote, okay, you say immigration, okay, we're going to go after Melania. We're going to go after all of the European immigrants too. Wait a minute, you said immigrants. I'm going to just like blindly say immigrants and go after, that's a lot of Jewish immigrants. I mean, Jewish have a whole lot, especially in New York City. So if we're going to attack the policy, the strongest way to attack this policy is if we say ICE, don't just focus on the Mexicans, don't just focus on the Latinos, focus on all of the Jews that are all along, what is that, Eastern Parkway? If we're gonna actually start to unravel what the Republicans are saying, you have to start getting to the pocketbook. You have to start getting like them, coming down a level and saying, listen, if we're gonna play this game, we have to play the game. Because our enemies have now crafted in such a way where they know you aren't willing to cross the line, but they've stepped over the line so far that you on the wall and the line should have been like halfway through the room. So we have to have a different conversation. We're sitting here and we're talking about redlining our youth get paid the least, period. I'm gonna from the age of 18 to 35, and they've actually pushed it up to 40 for other reasons. You have to take the lowest of the jobs. They're not promising a pension. They're not promising any 401k. They're not promising medical benefits because they're looking for seniors to take those jobs because they already have medical benefits. And medical is one of the highest part of any expense when you bring anybody new online. We're not forcing, you almost need affirmative action just to hire somebody between the age of 18 and 35. But we're not talking about this. We have physically attacked an entire generation. So what are the solutions behind Republican policies that tell us that, okay, you have to be forced to take some level of private medical insurance, which is fine. So now we're going to say, well, is your medical insurance going to pay for these medications that your specific doctors force us to take? Because if we could do, all of the alternate medical uses, and we have a lot of Reiki and other kinds of things that could help save you quicker from we can import a lot of not even medications, a lot of medicinal herbs from China will save you a whole lot quicker than half of the things America can come down the pike. But we're not allowed to bring those in because they actually save lives. We're not allowed to bring, every time we have something nutritious or we decide to do something to actually save the people in some way, and this is even other fellow doctors, magically they get sued. Magically they disappear. Magically, all these kinds of things we don't have access to, but they know they exist. When you ask about it, they say it's not researched enough. Well, why don't you research it enough so I can use it? Like the solutions behind the policy, if you're going to attack this, okay, Trump, then how about you attack these doctors who don't know anything? How about you attack these prescription pharmaceutical companies who were the same ones who, when you were like, at one point you were saying zinc and hydroxychloroquine, that was your first thing that you had mentioned before you mentioned bleach and all this other nonsense. But that hydroxychloroquine did save you at the time, because not because of hydroxychloroquine. Zinc was the key portion of that. Zinc being one of our greatest antiviral of minerals that doctors refuse to even research, recognize how much it takes to destroy this, that, or the third. Folks don't care anymore. So much money is in everything. Folks really don't care about living or dying. So in order to balance out, 2025 talks about, education and removing a lot of the boards in education. Okay, because a lot of those boards are so full with money that they don't really care about educating anymore. What are you going to put in its place? Are you going to look at those where we have, even in New York and New Jersey, we have Black school systems, whole school systems developed to show how fast children can learn from the age of 4 to 10 and put them practically on a college level? Are we going to try to just research to bring American children, white, Black, and different, up to speed? Or are we going to continue to slowly keep dumbing down that the only education they can get is at a college, which hasn't changed their education system within the last 100 years? College has rose all of its tuition 4, 5, 6, 20 times the value that it had. And it's the same education they gave you back in the 60s, 80s. If you're going to start attacking things, I don't mind attacking things. We have to attack things. What are you putting in its place?
I think one of the first things that we have to do, you guys believe in a tribe? A tribe. So a tribe is something that comes out of your community. It doesn't have to be your blood related person, but it's a tribe that you really trust. And I think as we, come together, and both you guys are saying the same thing, is unity. We have to have unity in order to scale the ladder, to move further up this chain. And as we come together, we have to have a tribe. I was going to ask you about this. How can we build Black Wall Street again in our communities across Brooklyn? I'm not even talking about the rest of the country.
First stop is financial literacy.
Financial literacy. Okay.
Our unification is through all of the other ethnicities as well. And the minute we have to begin to realize when we move, everyone is moving with us. I had to come to terms with that, where my identity is so intertwined with being Americanism that whatever I say is. And when we say Black Wall Street, when you say Blackness in anything, we have to invite our Latin, our brown brother and sister. We have to invite our Asian brown brother and sister, because there's a lot of brown Asians. And we can push Indian aside. Indian in itself is a brown, but South Asia is very brown like me too. We even have an Australian brown that's brown like me too. If we take a moment and say, I want to do this, but I need this kind of income, we have a lot of our white sisters who wouldn't mind flying over with the seas. Our Irish brothers and sisters who've been treated like Europe treats them like trash wouldn't mind. Now, Irish in America is different than Ireland. Because Ireland will step for us in a minute. Irish in America, that's a very different kind of relationship, not because it wasn't 60, 70 years ago. We were connected. But after all of the Americanism, Italian and Irish is now we not thick as thieves no more.
It's an economic
it's
separation.
economics as well as there was back then, and even prior to that, we there was no such thing as white. There was no such thing as black. That's a construct that just came and labeled people. And if we have that mindset, and that's a way of divide and conquer, right? And so once we get out of that mindset, you're black, you're white, you're Asian, whatever it may be, then you're able to start to build deep dive on building. So we are, as a people, have to, you say, come together with other groups of people, and we have always trust people. We have always trust. Our ancestors trust them as well, and trust many. But we have to get out of that mindset that you're no different than me. We're just the same people, and we start to build. I think that we can, once we do that, we can move forward throughout this Black Wall Street. It doesn't have to be just Black Wall Street. It's just being Wall Street for everyone.
So, but what you're really talking about is the having a common goal that the working class and the poor actually recognize what their economic disadvantages are in the ongoing political system. They say again, Democrats have been demonized as the coastal elites. All right. A lot of the coastal elites were able to attain a high level of education. All right. That's why they're the coastal elites. But think about who these people are. Look at the Vice President of the United States, right? He wrote a book which put him on the map, so to speak, that allowed him to be a senator from Ohio, Hillbilly Elegy. And he talks about the ravages of poverty and drug addiction and how that affected him, how he had to be raised by his grandparents. Isn't that a commonality of those who are disaffected, working class or poor, right? Don't we have to look for solutions for our foundation, because there are many more working class and poor people than there are trillionaires or soon to be trillionaires and billionaires? And when will we understand that if we work together collectively, we may be able to improve our lives?
White
That is true.
America, specifically, we're talking about those whom do not have access to college, those that have to live in the same town for the past 3-4 generations, who aren't allowed to leave. Even if they want to leave, they don't have the support from family, friends. You've been targeted as a way for the wealthy white to maintain what they have.
Can I just talk about one thing in targeting that comes out in Project 2025? The ability for the military to recruit children from public schools. They don't have private schools on that list, right? So what you're saying, to rebuild the military, right, we're going to, because the branches of government are having a hard time, or the branches of military are having a hard time recruiting. Let's go to the kids that have the least opportunity and make them part of our military, right? And if you look back, you look in the 60s, and everybody's child could be drafted. That gave the entire country a commonality to focus on what was going on in Vietnam. If it's just the poor kids, they don't have anything going on at home, they're not getting the support, why not be a part of the military? And there's nothing wrong as a strategy, but to target a whole group specifically for recruitment tells you that there isn't a value there, because Lord knows wars are getting more deadly. And you know what? Not really more deadly, because more people are surviving deadly wars.
More people
right?
are surviving.
But you now have to account for their medical care when they come home. How expensive is that? And where are they going to be?
The expectation that we're not supposed to survive is where we are. We haven't still gotten past that fact that back in 2000, 2010, it's always been this looming thing that we're trying to depopulate. And this is what's been used. Understand, this planet is so large and vast that 6 billion people could be in the United States and the country wouldn't even blink. We are nowhere near the capacity on the planet. What we have done is not cared about the planet so long that the trash, our feces, defecation, plastic, metal, has just built up because we're not even trying. Companies such as the oil companies, that was their responsibility to break down and recycle all of this trash. That's why they're given subsidies to do that. But we have to put more money into recycling the billions of dollars that they're given to do it for us. So again, we're giving these companies money that does absolutely nothing for anybody, and we have to put out more money to do both our jobs and their jobs. And that's why we constantly are putting pennies together when you're like, why would you give him that amount of money when you could give me that, just a small amount of that money? I could handle my own problem with that. Yes, I'll still recycle it through the economy and give him a little bit, give her a little bit, but you're giving it to the same few entities that don't know what to do with it.
So you're saying trickle down doesn't work?
It has never worked. And Reagan in itself, this policy of not helping the coastal cities was a Reagan thing. Now, Reagan is why we owe so many billions to our police departments that we can't control them as it is. We had to take out loans because Reagan sucked out everything from teachers to, this is the 80s. 80s, I don't understand why anybody try to go back to the 80s. That just don't. AIDS,
the music
suicides,
was good, the clothes were
good. Serial killers, and no money, gangs was rampant. If the people are acting out, there's a reason. Now that we have documented, because Netflix, I love the Netflix documentary, they put all your business out there. Netflix has actually shown the government specifically took the drugs out of the suburbs because this was the only time during the late 70s when inner cities kids were doing better than suburban kids. Put the drugs into the cities to decimate Black communities, took the same money that they were making off of decimating Black communities and destroyed Latin communities in South America because you had to get the drugs from somewhere. Now these same Latin people are coming up from South America because you've destroyed all of their villages. They had no problem with their home before. 30, 40 years ago, everybody was fine. Now that guns, drugs have ravaged so much of their land and America has made money off of, they're coming up to America to say, listen, you destroyed my country, now pay me back. They are asking for their reparations by coming here. Black folks, y'all ain't asking for reparations. You know you're not getting them. Well, the Latin community is asking for reparations. They are coming to America to get some of that land that they lost back at home or fix their problem that you made in their homeland. That's the immigration migration situation there's this disconnect that for some reason, why are they coming here? They wouldn't have a problem if you didn't mess up their land. It make sense.
And it's not even just the land. I have a friend who's Ecuadorian, and I asked her why she decided that she was going to immigrate, right? And she said, well, it was a decision that was made by my family. It's like, what happened? When the gangs rolled into her school and executed teachers in her classroom, bye-bye, it's time to go. And how did those gangs grow? The gangs grew because of the drug trade. And why was there a drug trade? Because there was a demand for it in the United States. Simple policy.
It's not, the problems of today are just money. It hasn't changed, and we're not even trying to change the simple fact. The same ones we allow to make money, those of you who are like, where did my job go? They said it was cheaper to put it elsewhere.
And it is, because you have the same educational levels and you look at institutions like banks, they have offices in India, highly educated, lots less money to pay, right? They don't have the burden of the American health system.
It's not that it's a lot less to pay. It's literally they don't want to pay more.
Oh, okay, that's okay.
Guys, I'm gonna say this to us is I welcome both of you to Community Cuts, and Community Cuts audience really appreciate you, speaking from the heart. And both of you, I got that. And I love both of your energies. Energies is real. And so with that being said, I'm gonna say thank you, both of you, for coming on to Community Cuts and sharing that deepness that's within you. And I like to say that inner understanding that's within you that's coming out. Well, family, this is another evening at Salon Leahing, 732 Washington Avenue. We're asking you to come out and support our Black businesses. We are part of the Black businesses in Brooklyn, and we come out. Salon Leahing has supported us. We're supporting them, and I'm asking you also to support your own Black business in your own communities. We need to circulate the dollars that we spend. We spend close to $1 trillion or more, and it doesn't come back to our community. So with that being said, please support our businesses, our Black businesses that lives or works in our community. Thank you. Thank you to the Community Cuts family, and thank everyone that's watching this show, this program. God bless. Thank you all, and good night.
Good night. So,
With